Welcome back. This is Dr. R covering some epidemiologic questions. We're going to dive right in. First off, taking a look at the lead-in. Can I answer the lead-in without actually going to the question stem? The answer is no, because it says what type of study in this example is. So when I look at the question answer choices, I notice that they are different types of studies. So when I come back up to the question stem, I know right away that I'm going to be looking to dissect this question and to start understanding which kind of study I'm going to be looking for. So let's just dive in. A group of researchers is investigating, or are investigating, the effectiveness of a new drug. So it's looking for effectiveness of a new drug for treating depression in adults. So they recruit 500 participants. With a diagnosis of major depressive disorder and randomly assign them to either receive the new drug or the placebo. So they get randomly assigned and they either get the drug or they get the placebo. And this is for looking at depression. The researchers monitor the participants over 6 months. So there is a time factor here of when it starts to 6 months. Assessing their symptoms and overall quality of life. So the outcomes are looking at symptoms and quality of life. Can't spell that, eh? So let's now go back and take a look at what kind of study this might be looking at. Okay. So the researcher monitors the participants over 6 months, assessing their symptoms and overall quality of life. So here's the start. And then here is the 6 months, and they look at symptoms and overall quality of life. So now let's go back to what kind of study this is. So a case control study. Is this a case control study? What do we know about case control? So case control often starts with, it's right there in the title, cases. And then the investigator goes and tries and finds controls that do not have the disease. So the cases have the disease, and the controls do not have the disease. Is that what happened here? No, they recruited 500 participants with a diagnosis of depressive and randomly assigned them to either receive a new drug or a placebo. I didn't hear anything about them choosing controls that do not have the disease. All of them had major depressive disorder, and then we either want to give them a drug or a placebo. So case control does not fit. Also, case control is often retrospective. So that means that the data usually already exists in a point in time and was collected here, and we are now looking at it here. So retrospectively, we are looking at data in history. Cohort study. So this doesn't really fit the idea of a cohort study. Because that is an observational study that follows people over time, but we're looking for a correlation between the exposure and the outcome. The researchers did not follow the group, but they randomly assigned participants to either receive the new drug or the placebo. So the random assignment and the manipulation of the investigator of putting them in two groups. So for instance, I started with 500 people, and then I manipulated by saying you're randomly going to go in this group, and you're randomly going to go in this group. In a cohort study, we don't have manipulation of the groups being created. They often either self-identify in order to be able to do that. So the cohort study does not fit this random manipulation assignment. A cross-sectional study is going to be a very single point in time. So if you look at a study's period over time, we are actually looking at right here, which would be a single point in time, and we would be most likely looking at the prevalence. So cross-sectional study doesn't really fit because we are starting here with this group and then looking at them over the 6 months and collecting data on symptoms and quality of life. So cross-sectional study doesn't really fit. Experimental study, this sounds very close to an experimental study because the researcher is having a choice or a manipulation of the random assignment and is creating some of the assignment that's happening in the study. So, experimental study seems to fit quite well because of the random assignments of the participants to the treatment and the control group. Now, let's quickly look at observational study. Well, observational study is a cross-sectional study or a cohort study or a case control study. And we already said that those didn't work. So I'm going to cross out this as less likely because really the experimental study is the most likely study to fit the description here in the question stem, given that it has the random assignments for the drug and the placebo, as well as the amount of time that they followed the participants of 6 months.